Hello, I'm Nora, and welcome back to Novels with Nora. Happy New Year! I love the end of the year and the start of the new year. I feel like it's such a good time for reflecting on the past year and setting goals for the new year and what you want to achieve for yourself in the new year. And I especially love this when it comes to books. I track my reading quite religiously. I have 3 apps, a spreadsheet, and a notebook where I track all of my reading. So I have a lot of information about my reading and the way that I read. So today I thought it would be fun to do a little end of the year reading wrap up and see what I've read and what kind of books I've been reading and how I've been reading. So I have my iPad here to share all of my stats with you, and I took quite a bit of time to make lovely pie charts that I'll be displaying on this side of the screen so you can follow along with me in what I'm sharing. First, I think it's important to just note that I read 40 books this year. My goal was 30 books. That's what I set my Goodreads goal as, and I achieved that. I read 40 books this year, which is super exciting. I did not think I'd even get to 30, so the fact that I got to 40, super exciting. And a lot of the books that I read are books that I absolutely love and have been thinking about since I finished them. So, that's always a good sign. So let's just dive right in with our stats. So like I said, I'll be putting the pie charts up on the side of the screen. So starting right in with the genre of books I read. So 22 of the 40 books I read were fantasy. 1 was thriller, 4 were sci-fi, 1 was romance, 3 were mystery, 6 horror, 1 historical, and 2 fiction. This is pretty much in line with what I've read in the past and how my past years of reading have looked. My top genre is almost always fantasy. However, I will say the inclusion of the 6 horror novels is new. I don't typically read horror, but I feel like the past year and a half, I've really started to pick up more horror, especially on recommendations from people on BookTube. So I'm really excited to see that. And then also 3 mystery. I don't feel like I typically read mystery, so that's exciting. And then 4 sci-fi, that also makes sense. I would like to see that number go up in 2025. I love reading sci-fi, so that's exciting. Fiction, thriller, romance, historical, all those ones that are small little slivers of the pie, those ones all also make sense to me. I don't typically pick those types of novels up, but when I do, I typically enjoy them. So these stats really make sense to me, and I'm happy with this reading. I think I would like to see the sci-fi and the horror sections get bigger in 2025, so we'll be keeping an eye out for that. But otherwise, I'm really happy with this reading. Next, we have my ratings for books. So I am so incredibly happy with the books I read this year and the ratings that I gave books. So I read 16 5-star reads. That is so incredibly wonderful. I think my average rating was like a 4.25, which is super high. I feel like I don't see that a whole lot. And I think that has to do with, one, I rate quite liberally. If I like a book, I'm gonna give it 5 stars. If there's not something I can point out of why it wouldn't be a 5-star, it's going to be a 5-star. And that's something I do think I want to improve on in the new year, is rating a little bit more critically and not just giving everything a 5-star just because I will say my 5 stars this year are all 5 stars. I was going back through and looking at all of them, and I did not adjust any of them. They're all solidly 5 stars, so that's super exciting. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I know what I'm gonna like, and those are the books that I pick up. I don't typically step out of my genre comfort zone, as you saw with the stats about genre, so that makes a lot of sense why I have so many 5 stars. I think just I know my reading so well and my taste in books that those are the books that I'm picking up. I'm not picking up a whole lot of stuff that I'm not sure if I'm gonna like. So I do definitely want to step out of my comfort zone a little bit and pick up some new things, even if that brings my overall rating down. I think it would be interesting to see. Maybe it would go up actually if I'm trying new things. We'd have to see. But then I had 4 4.5-star reads, 10 4-star reads, 5 3.5-star reads, 4 3-star reads, and unfortunately 1 2.5-star read. I think for being my lowest rating, a 2.5 stars is really not that awful. Like, I don't have any 1 stars. I did DNF 1 book, but that was mainly, I might go back to it and pick it up later. It might have just been the timing I was reading it. We'll have to see on that. But so 2.5 being my lowest rating is actually pretty good. And unfortunately, it was a book that I was super excited about. So that is a little bit of a bummer, but I think overall my ratings were really good this year and I read a lot of really great books. So moving on to the audience of the books that I read. Again, very typical for me. I read 26 YA books and 13 adult books. I think this is the highest percentage of adult books that I've read in recent memory. So that's pretty exciting. And I think that has a lot to do with I'm becoming an adult. Gross. So I think my reading taste is evolving a little bit. I still love YA and I'll still continue to read YA, especially as I want to be a teen librarian. YA is always going to be a big part of my life. And also I just love YA novels. They're so fun. But I think I'm definitely stepping into adult novels a bit more as well. Next, we have the format of the books that I read. This one was actually super interesting for me to track, especially being in school. I was interested to see what format of reading was keeping my attention the most. And unsurprisingly to me, my highest category was physical and audio at 33 books. So that means I had the physical book and I was also listening to the audiobook while reading along, which is my favorite way of reading, so I think that makes sense. And this is your reminder that audiobooks do count as reading, and if you disagree, you're wrong. But this makes sense as being my highest slice of the pie because this is my preferred format of reading, and it's also great because then I can read the physical book when I have any downtime, but when I'm at work, a lot of times we have to like go up to the floors and like pull books or pack things to send them to other schools, and we're allowed to listen to things during that, and so I'll typically listen to audiobooks, so that makes sense. Next, we have 5 physical books. This also makes sense to me. I own a lot of books and I'm trying to read through them, so it makes sense that I'm reading a lot of physical books, especially as that's what I own. I have a Kindle, but I don't love using it really. I feel like I'm getting more into it this year, and I would like to continue that into the next year, but I only recently learned how to get my ebooks from the library from Libby onto my Kindle, so I think we're going to see that number go up in 2025, which is why I only had 2 ebook and audiobook reads this year. They were both ones that I'd gotten from the library and read the ebook and listened to the audiobook. So this makes sense to me. I don't really see this changing a whole lot in the new year. I might read more ebooks just because I learned how to do that on my Kindle. But otherwise, I think that this makes perfect sense and is very in line with how I've been reading in the past and how I imagine I will continue reading in the future. So next we have how I acquired the books that I read. Unsurprisingly, 34 of the books I read this year, so 34 out of 40 were books that I already owned. This makes complete sense to me, especially when I was at school. I took books that I owned with me, so that's what I was reading, so that makes perfect sense. And then 6 of those were from the library. Again, makes perfect sense. I don't really have other ways of getting books. I really love seeing that the biggest percentage here are books that I already owned. I love that so much, and I definitely want to keep that going in the new year. That's very exciting. And then finally, we have author stats. So 27 of the books that I read were from authors that I'd read before. This, again, makes sense. Most of the books I own are from authors that I've read before, know I like their reading style, and know that I'm probably going to enjoy. So this makes perfect sense to me. 7 of these novels were from authors that were new to me, so they'd already published in the past, but I hadn't read their work before. So this is also really exciting. I love reading new authors, and I might have found some new favorite authors this year, so that's very exciting. And then the final 6 of the books I read were from debut authors, which is also super exciting. I love reading from debut authors, so I'm really glad that I got to read 6 of them this year, and I definitely want to see that number go up in the new year, and I think that we can definitely do that. So those were my reading stats for the year. I think a lot of these, like, there weren't really any big surprises. Most of everything that I shared is things that have been the same in the past and are going to probably continue to be the same. I don't really foresee any of that changing a whole bunch. So everything really made sense. There weren't really any surprises, but I always love seeing all of that and seeing all the stats laid out. So that was super fun. So next I thought I could share my top 5 and my bottom 5 reads of the year. So we'll start with the bottom first and work our way to the top, so we leave on a positive note. Okay, so now I will share my bottom 5 reads of the year. And a lot of these are disappointing that they weren't rated higher, but I think that's just how it is sometimes. So I will start from the least bad to the most bad and do it that way. So first we have our biggest disappointment of the year, Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. I absolutely loved Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. So I was really looking forward to this release, and unfortunately it just didn't do it for me. I gave this one a 3-star and I really loved it towards the end, but in the beginning it just felt very slow and very repetitive and very pointless, which, like, I hate saying that because I was so looking forward to this book, but it just didn't do it for me, and that makes me so sad. But unfortunately this just didn't really do what I wanted it to do, which it sounds like it should be something that I would absolutely love. Unfortunately, it just wasn't. It felt flat for me, and I really liked it towards the end. I just think things needed to be dialed up a little bit, and they just weren't. And it really hurt because I really wanted to love this because I love Dead Silence by her, and it was one of my favorite books of last year. So the fact that I didn't like this one as much, devastating. Next, we had A Magic Steeped in Poison, and I think this actually was a reread so that I could read the sequel, and it just didn't live up to what I had felt about it the first time. I really love the magic system in this book and I love the characters, but I wish we had seen more of the magic and more of like the political intrigue in this book. But otherwise, I did think it was a good book. I just like the sequel better, and rereading it, it just didn't live up. 3 stars, again, really is not a bad rating. It's just these are like the bottom of my 3 stars. Next, we have Beyond the End of the World by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. I was so looking forward to this. Again, I reread the first one to get to this one. Read the first one of the series last year, I think, and I reread it again this year. This just really was not it for me. The way that it wrapped up kind of made everything that happened in the entire book feel pointless. I remember finishing it and being like, okay, so what was the point? Why did we do all of that just to get here? And that is not how you should feel when you finish a book. So building on that is The Other Side of the Sky, the first book in that duology. And I think possibly finishing that one tainted my view of this one, because when you finish it, you're like, so why did I spend my time reading this? But I like the characters. I really love the characters. The world building was super interesting. I did enjoy that. Something was just lacking in these books. I definitely prefer the second one. I think it just built on the characters better, and we got introduced to some new characters and we learned more about people's motivations. But this just fell flat for me, unfortunately. And that brings us to my least favorite book of the year, Monsters Born and Made. I was so looking forward to this. Truly, everything about it sounded like it would be right up my alley. It sounded like I would absolutely love it, and I just didn't. I was reading it and I considered DNFing it so many times, but I was like, I want to know how it finishes. I should have just DNF'd it. It was not worth it at all. This book, there was one scene where, I'm not going to spoil anything, but where two important characters, something bad happens. And it happened so quickly, and then we moved on to something else, and I was like, well, now what happened to them does not feel like it actually meant anything, because we moved on and the main character does not seem to care like at all. And it's like, so why? And also the way it ended, again, made the whole thing feel like, well, why did I spend my time reading any of this just for that ending? And unfortunately, this one did also break my heart, because I was really looking forward to this. I was saving it for this year because I thought it was going to be a 5-star read, and it was a 2.5-star read. So I just remember thinking, these characters are kind of insufferable, and everything they're doing feels ridiculous. Like, I was reading it and I was just like, why? Why is this the course of action that you're choosing for yourself? And I don't think that's how I should be feeling when reading, unless that's the author's intention, and that did not feel like this author's intention. This author does have another book coming out. This also sounds super interesting, and I am gonna pick it up. I think maybe this was just like a debut fluke for me, and the next one she'll have found her voice more, and I'll hopefully like that one better. So those were my bottom 5 reads of the year. I always hate having low rated reads, but I feel like the lowest rating there was a 2.5, so it's not that awful. It's just disappointing that 2 of them were books I was so excited for and then ended up being kind of flops for me. But now we can move on to my top 5 reads of the year. Okay, so now I will share my top 5 reads of the year, and I'm much more excited to talk about these. So again, starting with least most favorite and then going to most favorite, if that makes sense. So first we have Cursed Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This is in the Twin Crown series. This is book 2. I absolutely ate this up. This is such a perfect continuation of the series. Truly just built on the characters so well, introduced new characters, had so much more world building. I ate this up. I absolutely loved this. I just had so much fun with this series, and I was so sad when the series was over. But truly, absolutely fantastic series. Highly recommend you pick this up. These books are kind of chunky, but they're so worth it. The twins and their dynamic is so wonderful, and it really feels like they're like sisters that you would know. These authors just do such a great job of weaving their voices so seamlessly, and I just read this series so wonderful. Next, we have The Traitor's Kingdom by Erin Beatty. So this is the conclusion to the Traitor's Circle trilogy that I started so many years ago and finally got around to finishing this year. And boy, did it break my heart to finish this series. Absolutely wonderful book, but I'm just so sad that I don't have this series to be like, well, I'm done with it. There's no more in this world, and these characters, like, their stories are done. But they wrapped up so perfectly, and everything that happened to them just brought them to the most beautiful place of like healing and conclusion at the end. Absolutely loved it. Really the perfect conclusion to a trilogy. And I don't say that lightly. This trilogy took you on an emotional journey. It built you up and it tore you down. And the conclusion really did a great job of stitching all the pieces back together and really just wrapping everything up. And it was so perfect and a beautiful conclusion to the trilogy. Next, we have, I'm actually going to do these 2 at the same time. First Sister and Second Rebel by Lyndon A. Lewis. So this is the first one and this is the second one in a trilogy. My rating would be this one's higher than this one. I absolutely love these books. This series has so much happening, and like all the time there's so many characters, there's so many POVs, but they all weave together so seamlessly. And I'm going to be reading the third one this year, and I cannot wait to see how the author pulls them all together, all the storylines, and makes it into one like conclusive story. But I absolutely love these books. The writing is so wonderful. I feel like in anyone else's hands, these books would be so confusing, but this author does it so perfectly that nothing was ever confusing. Everything always made sense, even with all of like the political intrigue and like the war drama and like everything about it just worked so well for me, and absolutely amazing books. Truly, again, read this series. Next, we have something that you might not see coming based on my other 4 books here that are all fantasy sci-fi. We have Brutes by Diz Tate, which is solidly fiction. There is no fantasy in this book. And this book, I will say, check trigger and content warnings because there is a lot in this book. However, the way she writes about these friendships and these girls, just something about it really spoke to me in a way that I have been thinking about this book since finishing it. I feel like there's not a whole lot. This is a pretty short book, so I feel like there's not a lot I can say about it without spoiling anything, but it's about these girls, the way that they entertain themselves and like keep their friendship alive in the most weird, freaky ways. But this is just such an amazing book. I don't know what it is about this, but it just really spoke to me. I got this recommendation from a booktuber who said that she started reading it and it took a turn and she didn't like it. And I was like, well, that sounds like something I'm going to enjoy. And I picked it up and absolutely loved it. I am so glad that I picked this one up. This is truly one of the best books I've ever read. The author's writing, this is her debut novel, and it is this good. So I cannot wait to see what she does next. And I really hope she publishes more like full-length fiction. She's done a lot of short stories, but this, I need more of this so badly. So those are my top 5 and bottom 5 reads of the year. Really very happy with the reading year that I had. I read so many great things, finished 2 series that I'm really excited about and that I'm sad to have be done with now, but that I'm really grateful that I got to read. And I also started some new series that I'm super excited to finish in the new year. So this was a really great reading year for me, and I hope I can bring that forward into the new year. So let me know what your top 5 books of the year were, if you read any of my top or bottom 5, and what you thought. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!